He stopped so suddenly that the man behind him almost walked straight into his back. The city noise, traffic, distant sirens, footsteps, fell away, replaced by a hollow ringing in his ears. His hand tightened around the strap of his leather briefcase, knuckles whitening, as his eyes refused to blink. On the sidewalk, sitting on a piece of flattened cardboard, was a woman crying. Not quietly, not politely. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deeper than the lungs. Raw, exhausted, and broken. She pulled her knees closer to her chest as if the cold itself were trying to steal something from her. Her shoulders shook. Tears cut clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. And around her, too close, far too close to the ground, were 3 babies. One slept in her lap, wrapped in a blanket so thin it looked more symbolic than useful. Another, barely old enough to walk, clutched the front of her oversized hoodie with both hands, his face pressed into her side. The third lay beside her in a small bundle of mismatched cloth, tiny fingers poking out, unmoving except for the faint rise and fall of breath. The man couldn't move. This wasn't a sad scene. It was an impossible one. Because even under the dirt, the tears, the tangled hair, he recognized her. The curve of her cheek, the slight scar near her eyebrow, the way she instinctively bent her body to shield the children from the wind. His chest tightened so hard he thought he might actually fall. "No," he whispered, though no one heard him. "No, that's not." She looked up, and in that instant, the last decade of his life collapsed in on itself. Her eyes widened, not with hope, not with relief, but with pure, naked shock, as if she were staring at a ghost she had buried a long time ago. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The city kept breathing around them, unaware it was witnessing the exact moment 2 lives slammed back into each other. "Ethan," she said. His name, cracked and trembling, landed like a physical blow. It was her, not someone who looked like her. Not a cruel coincidence. It was Lena, his ex-wife, the woman he had once promised forever to, the woman who used to fall asleep on his chest, the woman who had walked out of his apartment 8 years ago with nothing but a single suitcase and a look he had never been able to forget. And now, she was homeless, crying, with 3 children. His gaze dropped involuntarily to the babies. 3. The math hit him instantly, brutally. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lena followed his eyes. Her arms tightened around the child in her lap, instinctively, protectively. "They're mine," she said quickly, her voice hoarse, defensive, as if the world had taught her to expect accusation instead of help. I'm not asking you for anything." He finally forced his legs to move. 1 step forward, then another. Each one felt like walking into a memory he had spent years trying to outrun. What happened to you?" he asked. It was the wrong question. Her laugh, short, bitter, almost hysterical, cut through the cold. "You don't get to ask that," she said, shaking her head. "Not after you left." "I didn't leave," he said immediately. "You walked away. You said—" "I said I couldn't breathe anymore," she snapped, then stopped herself as the toddler whimpered. She lowered her voice, tears spilling again. "I said I was drowning, and you were too busy building a life you forgot to look at the person standing next to you." The words landed, sharp and old and familiar. Ethan looked at her clothes, the cardboard, the baby's thin jackets. This wasn't a rough patch. This was survival. "How long have you been like this?" he asked quietly. Lena hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, she answered, "Long enough to stop believing you'd ever see me like this." A police siren wailed somewhere nearby. Ethan didn't know why, but the sound made his stomach drop. Because suddenly, painfully, he understood something. This moment, this frozen second on the sidewalk, wasn't the end of her story. It was the moment it was about to get much worse. Lena didn't leave because she stopped loving Ethan. She left because loving him made her feel like she was slowly disappearing. When they first married, she had been bright. Loud laugh, big opinions, dreams that spilled out of her mouth faster than she could organize them. She wanted to finish school. She talked about becoming a nurse, maybe a counselor. She wanted children someday, but not yet. Ethan loved her fire. But he also loved control, not in a cruel way, not intentionally, just quietly. He planned everything: 5-year goals, promotions, savings accounts, dinner reservations, vacations mapped down to the hour. He believed stability was love. Lena needed space to breathe. At first, she tried to fit herself into his life. She followed his schedules. She waited up for him when he worked late. She smiled at dinner parties and learned to keep her worries to herself. But inside, something began to unravel. She started having panic attacks in places she couldn't escape. Buses, grocery stores, crowded sidewalks. Her chest would tighten. Her vision would blur. She would feel like she was drowning while everyone else walked past her, unaware. When she tried to explain, Ethan listened, but only halfway. "You're safe," he'd say. "You don't need to worry. We're doing fine." But fine wasn't the same as alive. The night she left, the argument wasn't explosive. It was quiet, tired, dangerous in its calm. "I feel like I'm vanishing," she told him, tears pooling but not falling. "Like one day you'll wake up and I won't be here, and you won't even notice." Ethan sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You're making problems where there aren't any." That sentence broke her. She packed one suitcase because packing more felt like admitting she had failed. She stood in the doorway for a long time, shaking, hoping he'd look up from his laptop. He didn't, so she left. What Ethan never knew, what she didn't tell anyone, was that she was already pregnant. She found out 2 weeks later, alone in a clinic bathroom, staring at a test she couldn't afford to take twice. She called his number, hung up, called again, hung up again. She was terrified he'd see the pregnancy not as life, but as responsibility, as disruption, as something to be managed. So she decided to disappear completely. Ethan didn't ask for proof. He didn't demand explanations. He took off his coat, kneeled down on the freezing sidewalk, and wrapped it around Noah without a second thought. Lena stared at him like she didn't trust what she was seeing. "You don't have to," she started. "I do," he said quietly. The police siren from earlier grew louder. A cruiser slowed. An officer stepped out. "Sir," the officer said cautiously, "is there a problem here?" Ethan didn't even look up. "This is my family," he said. Lena's breath caught. The officer hesitated, looked at the children, at the cardboard, at Ethan's suit. "Sir, she's been reported as—" "I don't care," Ethan interrupted, finally standing. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Whatever paperwork you have, whatever system you're following, she's not invisible anymore." The officer softened. "Do you have somewhere safe to take them?" Ethan looked at Lena, not the woman he used to argue with, the woman who had survived what he never saw. "My home," he said, "if she wants it." Silence stretched between them. Lena searched his face for judgment, for pity, for control. She found none. Only regret, only accountability, only a man finally seeing her. "Yes," she whispered. The truth didn't come out on the sidewalk. It came weeks later, after Ethan took them home, after hot baths and clean clothes, after the babies slept in real beds for the first time in months, after Lena stopped flinching every time someone raised their voice. One night, while the children slept, Ethan found Lena sitting on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, staring at nothing. "You okay?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and you might hate me for it." He sat down across from her. "No," he said, "just tell me." Her hands trembled. "I tried to come back." His breath caught. "What?" "After Noah was born," she whispered. "I tried." She told him about the night she showed up outside his apartment with a newborn in her arms. How she'd stood across the street for almost an hour, watching his lights. "I saw you through the window," she said. "You were pacing, on the phone. You looked so angry." Ethan frowned. "I don't remember." "You were," she said softly, "because you just found out." She swallowed. "Your business partner had been stealing from you. The company was about to collapse." Ethan went still. "That was the worst month of my life," he said slowly. "I know," Lena whispered. "I overheard you shouting, saying you couldn't handle anything else, that if one more thing went wrong, you'd break." Her eyes filled with tears. "So I turned around." Ethan felt something tear open in his chest. "I fixed it," he said hoarsely. "I saved the company. I survived." "I didn't know that," she said. "All I knew was that you were drowning, and I didn't want to be the weight that pulled you under." Silence pressed down between them. Then she told him the final truth. "The other 2 children," she said, voice barely there. "They aren't yours." Ethan nodded. "I know." She looked up, shocked. "But they are mine now," he said. "And that's enough." She broke. She sobbed the way people do when they've been strong for too long. Loud, uncontrollable, apologetic. "I should have told you," she cried. "I should have trusted you. And I should have seen you," Ethan said, his own eyes wet. "I should have listened." The next morning, Ethan carried the youngest baby down the stairs himself. Lena watched from the doorway, unsure, afraid this was temporary, afraid kindness had an expiration date. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home," Ethan said simply. They drove in silence. When they stopped, Lena realized where they were. The old house, the one they'd bought together before everything went wrong. "I never sold it," Ethan said quietly. "I couldn't." Inside, the house smelled like dust and memory. Ethan set the baby down gently, then turned to Lena. "I'm not asking you to be my wife again," he said. "Not now. Maybe not ever." Her chest tightened. "I'm asking you to let me be here," he continued. "For them, for you, for whatever this becomes." Lena looked at her children, then at the man who had once failed her and was now choosing not to. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Months later, a photo circulated online. A man kneeling on a living room floor, helping a toddler stack blocks. A woman in the background, watching, not guarded, not afraid, just hopeful. The caption read, "He didn't save her, he finally saw her." And that was the truth. Because sometimes love isn't about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about coming back and choosing to stay when it would be easier to walk away again. If stories like this remind you to slow down and really see the people around you, consider subscribing. More stories are waiting.